everyone. Welcome to the Self-Awareness Journey podcast. I'm Melissa Albers.
And I'm JJ Parker. This podcast is for seekers. Seekers of happiness and joy. Seekers of a centered approach to success in life. Seekers of their true, authentic selves.
Get ready for some real talk on everything from anxiety, emotions, and habits to love, compassion, and forgiveness. We know you'll be challenged and enlightened by this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Okay, so JJ, you know we've been trying to be better about marketing. Right. With fairly limited success, but we're getting a little better. We're getting trying. A little better. Okay, so I came across a really, really good article. I think and I'm anxious to talk with you about it today.
Oh, that's the article we posted a few weeks back, on social media.
Oh, we did? Oh.
No, I didn't read.
I didn't remember we did that.
No, we totally did that.
Oh, yes, we did. Yes. Well, we didn't post the whole article. What we actually did is we did a LinkedIn survey.
Yeah, a little snippet of that.
Yes.
Okay, so what was that survey?
Yeah, so...
I remember I filled it out.
Right. I don't remember. Yes, I do remember.
The survey was something like, do you think you are self-aware?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yep. Yes, and the findings that came from the survey.
Our super scientific survey.
Right. The Forbes article was contributed to by a woman who is an organizational psychologist. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise of her article was 95% of people think they are self-aware, and only 10 to 15% actually are.
So that's a really interesting statistic. So that's what spurred our LinkedIn questionnaire.
Right.
I think our data probably followed close to that.
And
we don't really know if they are actually self-aware. But most people did think they were self-aware.
Yeah. Yes, almost exclusively people did. And I think maybe just a handful of people said that they weren't. So I think that's really interesting. And you know what's really also very fun about this is that in all of our work with the self-awareness journey, we've never looked for data, right? But we have in one article so much data, it's overwhelming, right?
So let's talk about that. But first, I think it's really fascinating that there is such a gap between what people think and what they actually are. Right. And so what is happening there?
Yeah.
That's creating such a difference of opinion.
Well, it's funny you should ask, because that was actually the first part of the article.
Okay.
Is why does this happen? Why are we in this spot? And she actually cites that there are 3 reasons why people are not as self-aware as they think they are. And one of them is everyone has a natural blind spot. You want to see yourself better. You want to naturally see yourself in a different light because it makes you feel better.
Okay. So just as a matter of, you want your view of yourself to be positive.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because it's easier to live with yourself, right?
Yeah.
I got
to live with myself every day.
Yeah. And don't you just rather feel better?
Why am I living with this grumpy person all the time?
No matter where I go, there I am.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it makes sense, right? It makes sense that you're, the way you think of yourself, you would just want generally to be positive. Right.
And I think most of us do that. I mean, sometimes we get down on ourselves, but generally speaking, I think we all want to think that we're good people and that we know how to be with others, and how to be a good person. Yeah. The second reason that she gave was that we are actually unaware of how we are behaving.
Externally?
Yeah. That took me by surprise a little bit.
So, let's talk about what that actually means. Yeah. We're unaware of how we're behaving. That means, when I interact with you, when I go interact with my colleagues, my family, what I'm not... How am I not aware of how I'm behaving? Well,
in your interactions with people, I'll answer it with another question. Have you not been in the room when you've seen someone sort of behaving in a way that's not going along with the rest of the room, or they're behaving in a way that makes them not look good and they don't even notice?
Yes.
Okay. That.
For instance, right before we were recording this podcast, you're like, JJ, you're super squirrely today. And I'm like, no, I'm not. What are you talking about? And you're like, I don't even think we're going to be able to record a podcast today.
Okay, well.
And you're right. You're right. I was actually, I mean, honestly, I am honestly telling you that I didn't think I was being that squirrely this morning. But apparently I am unaware of my own behavior.
Okay, I'm just going to call you out on this now because it is kind of funny. So in the 3 minutes before we hit record, I said, here, I'm going to send you this article so that you have it. Yeah. And you're like, look at how they've formatted this article. It's ridiculous. There's so many ads. And I said, I know they're getting so bad with that. And then I said, okay, so did you look at the article? And you said, no, but so far I've applied for an American Express card where I get miles. And I was like, okay, get out of that. Get out of that. And then you said, oh, this article is referencing a book. Wait, I think I have this book. I said, are you sure? Oh, yeah, I really, well, it doesn't, well, okay, anyway, just look at the article. Oh, yeah, just a minute. So then there you were. Looking
at my library.
Your library. And pretty soon we were down a rabbit hole of 4 or 5 titles.
So touche. I'm not aware of my behavior.
Touche. Okay, so I guess she's right. I mean, just because she's an organizational psychologist, she thinks she has all these. Well, clearly she does. Okay. Then the third reason why she thinks that we're in this situation where so many think they're self-aware, but they are not, is she said that she's calling it the cult of self. And that has a very dark tone to it.
Well, that's kind of like a powerful statement.
It really is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the cult of self, the way that she described it, is we've just generally become more self-aware or self-absorbed as a people. And she cited social media as an example.
So that makes me think like you are narcissistic by nature, right?
Yeah.
Is kind of what she's saying there. And
that's amping up.
Oh,
she's saying that's amping
up. As a society or part of our culture, that's becoming more amplified.
Yeah. You know what I just got as a visual in my mind as we said that? I started thinking, like if you're on Instagram or you're in Facebook, first of all, every phone is mapping every single word you say. And all of a sudden, all the ads start showing up on the right-hand side of your social media. And it's columns and columns of ads that are specific to you. And whatever you start looking at for articles, whatever you start looking at for products, they are curating all of those articles, all of those products, everything specific to you. So you just get more of what you want, more of what you see, more of you, and your whole social media platforms become that.
Yeah, it's like the information echo chamber effect.
Oh yeah.
So, but the idea that we have a lot of tools and we engage in a lot of products that create more self-referential thinking is a really interesting idea. I had actually not even thought, I've thought about sort of like the effects of social media in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Like numbing ourselves out and all the things we've talked about.
Yeah, the idea that it makes you more narcissistic
I hadn't thought of that
is pretty
either.
obvious. But I hadn't thought about that very, very deeply, right?
Yep. We should probably do a podcast on that. That sounds like a really good topic to delve into some.
Yeah, and so part of that self-referential thinking is kind of survival, I feel like. There's a line where I do need to think about myself. I do need to, feed myself, protect myself,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
There's some
just
basic
being a human
things,
being.
but then it goes to that next level where it's like I need way more attention.
Yep.
Or I'm craving way more attention than I actually need.
Yeah.
You're getting into the cycle, and things like social media will really.
Yeah.
So her thesis there is the more you get into like that self-referential thinking, the less self-aware you actually become.
Yeah. And I can see how like these 3 reasons, like all actually work together.
Yeah.
They can start to feed off of each other because the first
say
one.
Them all again.
Yeah. So one was, again, we all have natural blind spots about where our deficiencies are. And the second one is that we're really, and I actually didn't say this, but in the blind spots portion, she said we're wired to operate as human beings. We're wired to operate on autopilot. And then the second part to that was unaware of how we are behaving. And then the third part was that cult of self. So you can see how as your world starts to get a little more curated and small, like an egg around you, how it can just one thing can feed off the next.
Yeah, especially that autopilot thinking.
Yeah.
I was even talking to my kids like last week about how my theory of like your brain is fundamentally lazy, or like your brain is lazy. It's trying to do like the least amount of effort possible. Right. So all that stuff where you just get in those thinking patterns. They become habit. You stop thinking about them and you just start doing them.
Yeah. You don't even think twice about it. It's just what you always do. So it must be right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So those things are causing us to be less self-aware.
Exactly right. Yeah. So
what do we do about it?
Yeah. So, and then actually right before we do that, what I'd also like to say is she did spend a lot of time at the beginning of the article talking about what being more self-aware gives to people. And because she's into organizations, she was referring to it from a business perspective. But, we've made countless videos and we've done lots of conversations about the benefit of being more self-aware.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it we always term it our hippy-dippy self, right? Yeah. But in this article, she's talking specifically about, and citing all these numbers and percentages about being more self-aware as a people allows you to perform better at work. That was the number one thing she said. The people that are more self-aware also get more promotions and they are more effective leaders as individuals. But then she even went out a little ways and said that companies that have more self-aware people in them perform stronger financially.
Yeah, I would anecdotally back that up.
Yeah,
like I can see that when we engage in other companies, when I talk to my other business owner buddies, and they talk about their organizations, you can see it.
I know, a mile away.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, and with you and your coaching practice, right? You kind of got an inside track.
Yeah.
Especially at that more emotional level. And I bet you see it all the time.
Oh man, yeah, and it is profound, the difference. It's profound, like to a point where now, because you and I have worked on this for so long, when I'm even engaging with organizations, if I can sense that even from the front door, I can feel myself walking backwards out the door. Like I don't want to engage with companies.
Like you won't work with a company that the people aren't trying to become more self-aware.
Right.
And
be more open,
better.
learn, have a perspective of learning, have a perspective of openness.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that lead to being more self-aware. But to what question you asked, you said, how do we get better with that? And she had a couple of really interesting things that I'm still kind of sort of unpacking, as they say, right? She said, really, there's two primary ways to get better, or two primary perspectives, not ways, I guess. One is from an internal and one is from an external. And she said, so to talk about the internal one first, and I think that's the one that you and I really have created, like all of our training course and everything else like that. It's from the internal perspective.
I feel like we spend a lot of time there.
Yeah, we do. However, we also have talked about from the outward, but it's interesting.
So help explain
right.
that.
Okay,
so
yeah.
To
Okay,
me,
right. I'm getting ahead
inward
of myself.
means like my own contemplation.
Yeah.
Like me thinking about my own thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, and she actually labeled them slightly different. She said that you truly understand your values, your passions, and your aspirations. So that does take self-reflection. Like you can't guess, right? And I think a lot of people do think they can just fall through life and that, they can set a goal for 5 o'clock tonight or whatever. But I think a lot of people kind of give up on thinking themselves through and understanding themselves more because it's just their own voice that they're listening to. I think they get tired of that sometimes and check out of that whole, because it's work.
Because it's work, because your brain is lazy.
Yeah, because your brain is lazy.
Well, we've done plenty of pods on core values and goal setting and things like that.
Yeah.
I agree. Like that. I mean, that to me, that stuff is pretty foundational.
Right.
But it's really hard work.
Right.
And when you don't have some of those values and goals guiding you, you can really feel lost.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Remember, didn't we do a podcast on our own personal values, and we had like a deck of cards and everything, right? I love that. I love that card deck. But it's really funny because I've been in a room with 600 people facilitating a conversation, and I'll ask people to raise their hand in the beginning of the morning. What are your personal goals? Do you know what are your values? Do you know what your values are? Raise your hand. And honestly, there can be 500 people in the room, and less than 5% will raise their hand every single time.
Yeah.
Less than 5%.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, the great thought leaders around this will say, if you don't actually recognize what your values are, you're missing a big part of you because you're already behaving in a way towards those values.
Yeah, right. We talked about you have values. If you don't know what they are, they're still there.
Yep. And you're still
behaving that way. But it's just way easier when you know them.
Yeah. So I really am on board with her on this whole idea of the inward part. But the thing I was curious about, though, is she said the other way to get better, having more self-awareness, is to know how others see you.
So, like, we didn't start a whole company based on that, right? So one of the things we tried to do with Coreology was to get peer feedback, right?
Yeah.
And actually, like, our
thesis,
totally
spaced that off.
Right? Our thesis in Coreology actually kind of changed a little bit over time.
Right.
As we're helping people go through that, like, self-awareness moment of learning about themselves. But we started with the idea that if we can collect feedback from our peers at work, and it'll help us understand how we're perceived, how we are by showing others, how we're showing up to others, right? Because we probably all have a story about how maybe we thought we were showing up in one way, and it was like someone else, it was completely different.
Yeah, their perspective was completely different than yours.
Just like before the pod. I didn't think I was all that squirrely.
Did you honestly not think you were? For realsies?
I honestly didn't very much. So, but...
I love it.
Right? And and no one's really accustomed to, like, giving you that feedback. Yeah. I mean, you're accustomed to giving me that feedback.
And you meet.
But we have a special relationship with that. But no one walks around the office that's like, oh, hey, Andy, by the way,
I can see
you're being a total a-hole. Right?
No, yeah, exactly right. And we don't feel comfortable even if we see something and recognize something. We as people don't usually feel comfortable coming alongside of someone and offering unsolicited feedback. Yeah. That's like a thing, especially here in the Midwest. It's even more of a thing.
Yeah. And even I use like an extreme example, but there's lots of little opportunities for feedback of more subtle behaviors and interactions, right? You could be a little more gentle in the way you gave that, like presentation. You could have, but we're just not accustomed to giving people that kind of feedback.
Right. We don't really know how.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think we know how. I mean, if anything, I think this is a great opportunity with the self-awareness journey. It's such a good opportunity for people to be in that conversation. We shifted our idea with Coreology to the idea that we should collect like a perspective of what other people think of us. Yep.
Then we kind of pivoted that to say, hey, let's figure out what we actually think of ourselves.
Right. The jelly beans.
Yes. So we actually changed how we were doing that for people And so it's interesting that...
You should explain it just a little bit for the visual, because I just threw out a term. No one knows what that means. I was going to
ignore the jelly beans part. Okay. That's hard to explain.
Well, actually, it wasn't. So we created a visual that would give a shape of something about how people saw someone.
Yeah.
And then the person, how they saw themselves, was overlaid. And then we had a quadrant system. So you could easily see where you were in alignment with how people thought of you, and then where you were really different. And it created this big gap, this color gap. It became a very visual, obvious way to see where the perspectives didn't match.
Yeah. So, for example, if I thought I was a really assertive person, but my colleagues were like, no, he's not assertive at all. It's just a pushover. There would be the gap, and that would be my opportunity to
that was so cool.
Show up different.
Yeah. So, I mean, gosh, even way back then, we were doing exactly what her research shows. Is that there are two ways to get better, and one is the internal approach, and one is the external approach. And the last piece I'll say about what she wrote, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I'm trying to think this through a little bit. She said the research shows that there is no relationship between the internal and the external approach. There's no relationship. It's like.
So what do you think that means?
I don't know. Does she mean that your work has to be separate depending on which focus it is? Or does she mean that if you only do one, you won't fully be manifesting a more aware perspective? It's interesting to think about that.
I don't know. That sounds like a cliffhanger because let's see. Because the author of that article was Tasha Eurich.
Okay, thank you.
Eurich. And the book was Insight.
Yes.
It was released in 2017.
Yeah. Okay, so if anybody's really interested in doing a deeper dive, they can read the book, or they can just keep following along with us.
That's true, but this is a super interesting conversation because I like you said, I like the data part of it. You and I talk about it all the time. We kind of flip back and forth between like there's a lot of personal benefits to being more self-aware,
right?
But there are so many work benefits.
Huge, It's
like, without being too blunt about it, it's just like you can do better in your career. You can outperform your colleagues, and ultimately, like you can make more money, be happier, be more effective if you work on being more self-aware.
Yeah, straight up.
Did you enjoy this episode? Please go to your favorite podcast platform to subscribe, rate, and leave a review so others can discover it as well.
Growing self-awareness is a lifelong journey, and there's always further to go. And it's better when we're all in it together. Please think of someone you know who could benefit from hearing today's conversation and share this episode with them. We can't thank you enough for listening. Until next time, happy exploring, seekers.